This is a story about the royal road, the longest road in the ancient world, and the small caravan of travelers who walked it together in the spring of 495 BCE, crossing 1,500 miles of mountain, river, and plain from the city of Sardis on the edge of the Aegean to the great Persian capital of Susa. They were not soldiers or kings. They were a merchant, a scribe, a young courier with an injured leg, and a girl leaving home for the first time. Ordinary people carrying their lives eastward through an empire that stretched from the shores of Africa to the mountains of India. And somewhere along the way, between the dust and the campfires and the slow rhythm of walking, each of them found something they did not know they were looking for. Let us begin in Sardis, in the last hour before dawn. The city sits at the foot of Mount Tmolus, where the Hermus River spreads through a wide, fertile valley, and the air carries the faintest salt memory of the Aegean 2 days' ride to the west. Sardis is an old city, older than the Persian Empire that now governs it, older than the Lydian kings who once filled its treasury with gold refined from the rivers. It is a city of layers, of languages spoken over one another in the markets, of Lydian grandmothers and Persian officials and Greek traders all sharing the same narrow streets. In the pre-dawn dark, the dye works along the river have already begun their day. The smell drifts through the lower city, sharp, mineral, earthy, the scent of madder root soaking in stone vats, of wool mordanted with alum, of the precious murex shells crushed for the purple dye that makes Sardian cloth famous from the Aegean to Babylon. In a courtyard near the eastern gate, a woman named Shirina moves between the loaded donkeys, checking the ropes that hold each bale of cloth. She works by lamplight, her hands quick and sure, pressing the bundles to test their balance, adjusting a strap here, retying a knot there. She has done this before. This will be her third crossing of the royal road, and her body knows the work the way a musician's hands know an instrument. The donkeys stand patient and heavy-laden, their breath visible in the cool air. 12 animals in all, carrying dyed wool and fine linen bound for the workshops and courts near Susa, where Persian nobles pay well for Sardian color. Near the gate, a young woman sits on a low wall with a leather satchel across her knees. She is watching Shirina work. Her name is Keshvar, and she has not slept. She is 19 years old, and in a few minutes she will walk through that gate and not return for a very long time, if she returns at all. Everything she is bringing with her fits in the satchel and a single traveling bundle, a change of clothes, a wooden comb, a small fired clay pendant her father pressed into her hands yesterday, closing her fingers around it and saying nothing, because he had already said everything that mattered. Shirina pauses by the last donkey, runs her hand along its flank, and looks toward Keshvar. She nods once. It is time. The gate at Sardis opens onto a road paved with worn cobblestones that catch the first pale light of the sky. Beyond the gate, the road descends gently through olive groves and garden plots before bending east along the valley floor. Somewhere ahead, beyond more distance than Keshvar can imagine, lies Susa and a new life. But for now, there is only the next step, and the one after that, and the sound of donkey hooves on stone as the caravan moves through the gate and into the morning. The first days are green. The road follows the Hermus River east through the widest part of the valley, where the soil is dark and rich, and the spring has set everything growing. Vineyards climb the lower slopes in neat rows. Fig trees spread their broad leaves over stone walls. Farmers are already in the fields, bent over young barley, and they straighten to watch the caravan pass. A common enough sight on the royal road, but worth a glance, worth a nod. Shirina raises a hand in greeting. She knows some of these people. She has passed this way before. The rhythm of caravan travel establishes itself quickly, and it is a rhythm unlike anything Keshvar has known. In Sardis, time was shaped by the sounds of the city, the calls of vendors, the clatter of looms, the temple bells marking the hours. Here, time is shaped by the body, the pace of walking, the position of the sun, the needs of the animals. They rise before dawn and walk through the cool morning hours. At midday, when the sun is high and the donkeys grow sluggish, they stop in whatever shade the road offers, a stand of plane trees, the overhang of a way station wall, and eat flatbread with cheese and dried fruit and rest. In the late afternoon they walk again, slower now, until Shirina chooses the evening camp, a way station if one falls at the right distance, or a level clearing near water if it does not. Keshvar walks beside Shirina for most of the first day, staying close, not out of fear exactly, but out of the instinct of someone who has stepped into a river and is still finding her footing. Shirina does not coddle her. She gives Keshvar small tasks. Hold this rope, count those bales when we stop, watch how I check the donkey's left foreleg, see how he favors it. She teaches the way the road teaches, through doing, through repetition, through the quiet authority of someone who simply knows and lets the knowledge flow naturally into the work. On the second evening, camped beside a creek that feeds the Hermes, Keshvar sits with her satchel open on her knees and turns the small clay pendant in her fingers. It is a simple thing, a disk of fired clay stamped with a pattern of crossed lines, the kind of token a potter might make in an idle moment. But her father had carried it for years. He told her once, when she was younger, that he had been given it by a man in the hills above Sardis on the day he decided to leave his family's farm and walk to the city to apprentice himself to a leather worker. He had been her age or near it. He had been terrified. The pendant was not valuable and it was not magic. It was simply proof that he had done the thing he was afraid to do and that the world had not ended. He had not told her what to do with it. He had simply given it to her and let her understand. Shirina sits nearby, mending a strap by firelight. She watches Keshvar turn the pendant, and her hands slow on the leather for a moment, a recognition, perhaps, or a memory of her own. She does not ask about it. There will be time. The valley narrows on the third day. The vineyards give way to rougher country, scrub oak, wild thyme growing in rocky pockets, the occasional shepherd watching from a hillside with a dog beside him. The road begins to climb. Keshvar feels it in her legs first, a new kind of tiredness, different from the tiredness of work. This is the tiredness of distance, of ground covered, of a body learning that it can carry itself much farther than it believed. At a way station on the fourth evening, a stone building with a courtyard and a well and a stable for animals, Shirina trades a few coins for barley and water for the donkeys, and a room for herself and Keshvar. The station keeper is an older woman with sun-darkened skin and a direct gaze. She speaks a dialect Keshvar does not fully understand, Phrygian threaded with Persian words, and Shirina answers in the same patchwork language, fluently, naturally. Keshvar watches this and feels, for the first time, the reality of where she is, not just on a road, but inside an empire so vast that the language changes before the landscape does. She lies awake that night on a straw mat in the small stone room, listening to the donkeys shifting in the stable, to the wind on the plateau above them, to Sharina's steady breathing. She thinks of her mother standing in the doorway of their house in Sardis, not crying, holding it all in her face instead. The pride and the worry woven so tightly together that they looked like the same thing. She sleeps eventually. The road will be there in the morning. The world opens. The caravan crests the last ridge of the Hermus Valley and steps onto the Anatolian plateau, and everything changes. The green closes behind them like a door. Ahead, the land stretches flat and immense under a sky so wide it seems to press down with its own weight. The plateau is dry grassland, tawny and wind-combed, broken by outcrops of pale stone and the occasional lonely tree bent permanently eastward by the prevailing wind. The air is thinner here, colder in the mornings, and the light has a clarity that makes distant things look deceptively close. A ridge that seems an hour away takes half a day to reach. They are in Phrygia now, the old heartland of King Midas, though that name means nothing to the shepherds who graze their flocks on the plateau's sparse grass. The road is wider here, well maintained, a packed earth surface 6 paces across, with shallow ditches on either side for drainage. Every 30 or so miles, a way station appears, a square stone building with thick walls and a courtyard, a well, a stable, sometimes a small garden where the station keeper grows onions and herbs in the sheltered lee of the wall. These are the bones of the empire, modest, functional, essential. Without them, the road would be just a line in the dirt. With them, it is a living thing, a chain of human outposts linking one end of the world to the other. Sharina moves through this landscape with the ease of familiarity. She knows which stations have good water and which have silty wells. She knows where the road forks and which fork to take. She carries, folded in a leather pouch, her viataka, the official travel pass issued by the satrapal administration in Sardis, stamped with a seal, authorizing her to draw rations at imperial way stations and granting her caravan passage along the royal road. She presents it at each station with the practiced ease of someone who has done this many times, and the station keepers examine it and nod and bring out grain for the donkeys and bread and beer for the travelers. Keshvar watches all of this. She is learning not just the road, but the woman who walks it, the way Sharina speaks differently to each station keeper, adjusting her language, her tone, her posture to match whoever stands before her. A Persian official gets formality and precision. A Phrygian farmer gets warmth and a few words in his own tongue. A fellow merchant gets the clipped, efficient language of trade. Keshvar has never seen anyone move through the world with such fluency, and she is beginning to understand that this is what Sharina actually trades in, not just cloth, but connection. The textiles are how she makes her living. The relationships are how she makes the road possible. It is at a way station on the edge of Cappadocia, 9 days east of Sardis, that they find the courier. The station is larger than most, a rectangular compound with room for several caravans, a long stable, and a separate building for the imperial messengers. Sharina has stayed here before. She knows the keeper, a wiry man named Tarkushu, who speaks with a Cappadocian accent and keeps a remarkably tidy courtyard. When the caravan arrives in the late afternoon, Tarkushu greets Shirina by name and begins the familiar routine of allocating space and distributing rations. But he also mentions, almost as an aside, that there is a young man here who has been waiting for days. A courier, he says, injured. His horse stumbled on the rocky stretch east of here and threw him. The leg is bad. He cannot ride. He has been watching other riders come and go, carrying the messages he should be carrying, and he is not taking it well. Shirina finds him sitting against the stable wall in the last of the afternoon light, his left leg extended stiffly before him, wrapped in linen strips that need changing. He is young, 22, perhaps 23, with the lean, weathered look of someone who lives outdoors and moves fast. His clothes are the standard issue of the Piradasish, a fitted tunic, leather riding trousers, boots worn soft from the stirrup. His face is tight with frustration, and when Shirina approaches, he looks up at her with the guarded expression of someone who does not want to be helped. His name is Darayava, and he has been a courier for nearly 4 years. He was good at it, one of the fastest riders on the Cappadocian leg, trusted with priority dispatches. The injury is not life-threatening, but it is complete. The leg will not bear his weight in a stirrup for weeks, possibly longer. The relay system has no use for a rider who cannot ride. He has been told to rest, to heal, to wait. He does not know how to wait. Shirina does not offer sympathy. She offers practicality. Her caravan is heading east. There is room for one more. He can ride one of the donkeys when his leg tires, and they will reach Susa in just over 2 months. It is not fast, she tells him, and something in her voice suggests she knows this is the part he will struggle with. But it is forward. Darayava looks at the donkeys, slow, heavy-footed, patient animals, the opposite of everything he has known, and accepts. He does not thank her, not yet, but he rises carefully and takes his place among the bales of dyed wool. The caravan moves on in the morning. The plateau stretches ahead, enormous and open, and Darayava walks with them at a pace that makes his jaw tight with the effort of tolerating it. The days on the plateau teach Darayava something he did not expect, that slowness has its own texture. As a courier, the road was a blur, the rhythmic thunder of hooves, the wind pressing his eyes to slits, the landscape reduced to a smear of brown and gold between relay stations. He could cover in a single day what this caravan covers in 3. The stations were not places to him. They were intervals, markers of distance consumed. He would arrive, hand off the sealed leather pouch, accept a drink of water, and wait for the next dispatch. He knew the station keepers by their efficiency, not their names. Now, walking, the world refuses to blur. Every stone on the road is individual. Every hour brings a subtly different quality of light. The plateau, which he has always thought of as empty, a flat nothing to be crossed as quickly as possible, reveals itself to be full of quiet detail. Pale yellow wildflowers growing in the cracks of roadside boulders. A hawk circling so high it is barely a mark against the sky. The way the wind changes direction in the late afternoon and carries from somewhere unseen the faint smell of wood smoke that means a settlement lies in the folds of the land nearby. He does not know what to do with any of this. It is beautiful, and he has no practice at beauty. The other travelers in the caravan give him space at first. Shirina, because she understands his restlessness and knows it will not be argued away. Keshvar, because she is shy of him, this lean and silent young man who walks with a visible limp and a barely visible anger. But Bardia, the Babylonian scribe, does not give him space. Bardia gives him conversation. They meet properly on the second day after Darayava joins the caravan. The older man has been walking near the rear, keeping pace with the slowest donkey, a gray animal with a philosophical expression and an inclination to stop and examine interesting plants. Bardia has been examining them too. When the caravan halts for the midday rest, he settles himself on a flat stone near Darayava and begins, without preamble, to ask about the road. Not the way a superior asks, testing, demanding, but the way a child asks, with genuine bewilderment and delight. What is that mountain called, the one with the flat top? How do the couriers know which path to take when the road forks? Is it true that the stations keep fresh horses day and night, even in winter? Darayava answers at first with the clipped brevity of someone who does not want company. But Bardia's curiosity is so plainly sincere, so free of any ulterior motive, that it is difficult to resist. But there is more to it than friendliness. Bardia sees things. On the third day, he points out to Darayava that the stone used in the way station they have just left is different from the stone in the one before, darker, more finely cut, laid in a different pattern. He wonders aloud whether local masons built each station with local rock and what that means about the empire's approach to construction, whether it sends its own builders or trusts the people who already live in a place to build in their own way. It is the kind of observation Darayava has never made, not because he lacks the intelligence for it, but because he has never held still long enough to notice. Bardia is a record keeper by trade and by temperament. He has spent 30 years in the administrative archives of Babylon, copying tablets, filing correspondence, recording the flow of grain and silver and labor that keeps the empire's machinery turning. His hands are stained with the residue of clay, faint, permanent marks in the creases of his fingers from decades of pressing reed styli into wet tablets. He can read Babylonian cuneiform fluently and Aramaic nearly as well, and he speaks Persian with the careful precision of someone who learned it as an adult and respects its grammar. This journey to Susa is his first real journey of any kind. He is carrying a sealed pouch of administrative tablets, records requested by the archives at Susa, but the tablets are an excuse, and he knows it. He could have sent them with any official courier, with someone like Darayava. Instead, he requested permission to deliver them in person. He told his superiors it was to ensure the document's safety. He told himself it was to see the capital. Both were true, but neither was the whole truth. The whole truth is harder to articulate, even to himself. It has everything to do with the feeling that his life has been a long, careful record of other people's transactions, and that he wanted, before the years took the option from him, to have a transaction of his own, to be inside the empire instead of describing it from the outside, to feel the road under his feet and the sun on his face, and know that the distances he has measured in columns of numbers are real, and that he has crossed them. He keeps all of this to himself. He asks Darayava if he can tell him more about the stations east of here, and if they are all made of this same pale stone, and Darayava, despite himself, finds that he is trying to remember. Keshvar, meanwhile, has been watching Darayava from the edges of the caravan's daily life, during meals, during the evening camps when the fire is lit and the donkeys are hobbled and the travelers sit together in the circle of warmth. She is curious about him, though she would not say so. He is the first person she has met on the road who is close to her own age, and there is something about his restlessness that she recognizes, though her version of it looks different. He is restless because he has been forced to slow down. She is restless because she has never moved this fast, this far in her life. Their first real conversation happens over a shared task. At one of the evening camps, Sharina asks Keshvar to help water the donkeys at a stream a short walk from the road. Darayava, who has been sitting apart, offers to help carry the water skins, not out of generosity, Keshvar suspects, but out of a need to be doing something, anything, other than sitting still. They walk to the stream together, fill the skins, carry them back. On the return, Keshvar asks him what it is like to ride the relay, what the world looks like at a gallop. He starts to answer quickly, as he does with everything, and then stops. He looks at the plateau around them, the long shadows of late afternoon, the grassland fading to amber in the low light, the road a pale line stretching east until it vanishes into the haze. He tells her that at a gallop you do not see any of this. You see the road and nothing else. You see the next station, always the next station. You are always arriving somewhere and never being anywhere. He says it as though he is just now hearing the words himself and is surprised by their shape. Keshvar says nothing for a moment. Then she tells him that in Sardis she could see the mountains from her family's doorway, and she always wondered what they looked like from the other side. Now she is on the other side, and she keeps turning around to look back at where the mountains were. It is not a profound exchange. They are young, and they are feeling their way toward saying true things to each other. But a door opens between them in that moment, a recognition almost that they are both learning the same lesson from different directions. He has been everywhere and never stopped. She has never left and is just starting. They are meeting in the middle, on this road, in this light, and neither of them quite knows what to do with the fact that it matters. They carry the water back to the camp in comfortable silence, and the donkeys drink, and the fire is built, and the stars come out over the plateau one by one, and the caravan settles into the deep quiet of a night so far from any city that the only sound is wind. The plateau does not end gently. It breaks. For days the land has been so flat and so vast that the sky itself seemed to be the only landmark, and the caravan moved through a world of horizontal lines, the road, the horizon, the long trails of cloud. But now, ahead, the earth gathers itself upward. The Taurus mountains rise out of the southern haze like a wall, their peaks still carrying snow, their flanks dark with forest. The road bends toward them, and Keshvar feels something tighten in her chest that is not fear exactly, but a kind of awe at the scale of what is coming. The Cilician Gates are one of the oldest passages through the Taurus range, a narrow gorge cut by a river through the mountain's spine, barely wide enough in places for two carts to pass abreast. Armies have marched through here. Traders have driven their animals through here for centuries before the Persians ever formalized the road. The stone walls rise on either side, sheer and pale, streaked with dark water stains where springs seep from the rock, and the air in the gorge is cool and damp, and carries the sound of rushing water in a way that makes it seem to come from everywhere at once. Sharina leads them through with the unhurried confidence that Keshvar has come to recognize as her deepest form of competence, not the confidence of someone who has never been afraid, but the confidence of someone who has learned which fears deserve attention and which are simply the mind making noise. She speaks quietly to the lead donkey, guiding it around fallen stones. She places her feet with care on the wet rock. She has been through the gates twice before, once in rain so heavy that the river rose to the animals' bellies, and they had to wait 3 hours on a ledge for it to recede. Today the weather is clear and the river is low, running fast and bright over polished stone, and the passage is beautiful rather than dangerous. Bardia walks with his face tilted upward, watching the strip of sky between the cliff walls. He has read descriptions of this place. Greek travelers wrote about it, Persian surveyors measured it, but the descriptions did not include the sound, the way the water echoes, the way the donkey's hooves ring on the stone floor of the gorge, the way a bird's call, some unseen thing high on the cliff face, bounces between the walls until it seems like a dozen birds singing in rounds. He stops more than once, and the caravan flows around him like water around a stone. And Sharina says nothing because she has begun to understand that his stopping is not slowness, it is attention. Darayava is quiet through the gates, but it is a different kind of quiet than the tight-jawed silence of his first days with the caravan. He has ridden through this gorge at a gallop, many times the horse's hooves throwing spray from the shallow river, the walls a blur of gray and white, the whole passage over in minutes. He remembers the speed of it, the exhilaration, but he does not remember the sound of the water or the color of the moss that grows in the cracks of the lower walls, green so deep it is almost black, or the way the light falls in a single bright column where the gorge widens for a moment before narrowing again. He is seeing all of this for the first time in a place he has been 100 times, and the realization is not comfortable. It sits in his chest like a stone. The understanding that speed had not been a way of experiencing the world. It had been a way of skipping over it. He tries to explain this to Keshvar as they emerge from the gorge onto the southern slopes of the Taurus, where the air is suddenly warmer and the vegetation changes. Olive trees again, and scrubby pines, and the smell of sun-heated rock. He does not say it eloquently. He says that he used to think he knew this road, and now he is not sure he knows any of it. Keshvar listens, and she tells him that maybe knowing a place and passing through it are not the same thing. She says it simply, the way she says most things, and he looks at her and nods once, and the nod holds more than the words did. The road descends through the southern foothills in long, gentle switchbacks. The caravan makes camp that evening on a shelf of flat ground overlooking a valley where small farms dot the landscape and smoke rises from a village below. The air is mild. Spring is further along here on the south side of the mountains. The trees are already full-leafed, and somewhere in the valley someone is burning brush, and the smoke mingles with the smell of blossoming almond trees and drifts uphill to where the caravan sits around its fire. Sharina produces, from one of the carefully packed bales, a small quantity of dried apricots and a round of hard cheese she purchased from the station keeper at the last stop. She portions them out with the same precise attention she gives to everything, not generously, not stingily, but correctly, accounting for the days still ahead and the appetite earned by the climb. Bardia accepts his share with the small formal nod of thanks he gives to everything, and Sharina catches his eye and almost smiles, and the camp feels warmer than the fire alone accounts for. They walk for 8 more days through the lowlands south and east of the Taurus, through rolling country that grows drier and more open as they move away from the mountains. The stations here are spaced further apart, and the land between them has a sparse, windswept beauty, pale soil, low shrubs of sage and terebinth, the occasional flock of goats attended by a solitary figure with a staff. The caravan has found its stride now. The donkeys know the routine. The travelers know each other's rhythms. Who rises first, who walks fastest, who needs quiet in the mornings, and who is ready to talk. And then one afternoon, from the top of a low rise, they see the river. The Euphrates does not announce itself gradually. It simply appears, a wide, shining presence laid across the land like a blade of light, so much larger than anything the word river prepares you for. Even Sharina, who has crossed it twice before, pauses at the top of the rise and lets herself look. The river is enormous here, running south between low bluffs of pale earth, carrying the snow melt of distant mountains to the floodplains of Mesopotamia far below. Its color is strange, not the clear blue of a mountain stream, but a milky, silty green, opaque with the sediment of 1,000 miles of country. It moves with a deceptive calm, its surface smooth and shining, but Sharina knows, and will tell Keshvar, that the current beneath that surface is powerful, and that the crossing is not a thing to take lightly. The way station at the Euphrates is one of the largest on the royal road, a substantial compound of stone buildings, stables, storerooms, and a wide yard where caravans gather to wait for the ferry. When Sharina's caravan arrives in the late afternoon, 2 other groups are already waiting, a train of Babylonian merchants heading west with a load of sesame oil in clay jars, and a small party of Persian officials traveling east with an armed escort. The yard has the atmosphere of a crossroads, busy but not hurried, full of the particular sociability that arises when strangers are thrown together by the logistics of a river crossing. The station keeper here is a man named Navid. He is perhaps 50, perhaps 60. His age is hard to read beneath the deep brown of a face that has spent decades in the sun and wind of this river valley. He is not tall, but he carries himself with the settled gravity of someone who has found the place where he belongs and has no interest in leaving it. He has kept this station for 15 years. He knows the river the way Sharina knows the road, intimately, respectfully, with an awareness of its moods that borders on conversation. He can look at the surface of the water and tell you how fast the current is running. He can read the color of the silt and know whether it rained in the mountains 3 days ago. He greets Sharina by name. They have met before, and his welcome is unhurried and genuine, the welcome of a man who has all the time the river requires and not a moment less. The crossing will happen in the morning, he tells them. The ferry, a broad, flat-bottomed raft of lashed timber guided by ropes strung between wooden posts on either bank, can take half a caravan at a time, and there are groups ahead of them. They will camp here tonight, cross tomorrow. There is no rushing the Euphrates. This enforced pause becomes one of the journey's unexpected gifts. With nowhere to go and nothing to do but wait, the caravan relaxes in a way that the daily rhythm of walking does not quite allow. The animals are unhitched and watered and turned loose in an enclosure to graze. The bales of cloth are stacked under a shelter, and the travelers, freed from the road's forward pull, settle into the station's courtyard and simply exist. Bardia walks to the river's edge. He stands there for a long time looking at the water. He has written about the Euphrates. Of course he has. He has worked in Babylon, a city built by the Euphrates' twin, the Tigris. But this stretch of the river is new to him. This is the upper Euphrates, younger and faster than the broad, slow river he knows in the south, and seeing it here feels like meeting the parent of someone you have known only as an adult. He watches the current and thinks about all the tablets he has copied that mention this river, tax records, irrigation reports, royal decrees about bridge maintenance, and how none of them captured this particular quality of light on water in the late afternoon, this smell of wet earth and river stone, this sound of moving water that is somehow both constant and always changing. Shirina finds him there. She has finished her arrangements with Navid, the crossing order, the fee, the plan for loading the animals, and she has come to the river with no purpose other than to stand beside it. She and Bardia have walked near each other for days now, trading small observations, sharing the comfortable silence of people who do not need to perform for each other. But here, at the river, with the evening light doing something remarkable to the water and the far bank golden with the last sun, they talk more openly than they have before. It begins with the river. Bardia tells her about Babylon, about the canals that thread the city like veins, about the way the Tigris floods in spring and the fields turn to shallow lakes that mirror the sky, about how he used to walk along the canal near his house in the evenings after a day at the archive and watch the water catch the sunset. He tells her this simply as a description of a place, but Shirina hears something else underneath it, the word used to, the past tense of a habit that has been broken. She asks gently if he lives alone in Babylon. He is quiet for a moment, and the river fills the silence. Then he tells her about Nasayit, his wife, how her parents in a city to the north grew frail and needed care, and Nasayit went to them, the right thing, the necessary thing, neither of them questioned it. How the months became years, and the letters between them grew shorter and further apart, not from anger, but from the quiet exhaustion of distance neither of them had chosen. How he continued his work at the archive because the work continued, and because without it the days had no shape. He does not tell this as a story of tragedy. He tells it as a man describes weather. This is what happened. This is how the seasons went. But Shirina hears the loneliness in it as clearly as she hears the river. She tells him something in return, not her whole story. They are not there yet, but a piece of it. She tells him that she has crossed the royal road 3 times now, and that each crossing was easier than the last, and that she has recently begun to wonder whether easier and better are the same thing. She is very good at the road, the skills, the contacts, the languages. She can manage a caravan and negotiate a river crossing and read a station keeper's mood in the time it takes to dismount a donkey. But she has noticed lately that she does all of this alone. Not physically. There are always people around her, hired handlers and fellow travelers, but in some essential way that she finds difficult to name. She has built a life that works, and she is proud of it. But it works the way a well-made tool works. it does not keep her warm. She offers this with the clear-eyed honesty of someone who has been thinking about it for a while and has only now found someone worth saying it to. Bardia looks at her and then at the river, and he says that he thinks the Euphrates might be the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. It is a strange response, and it is exactly the right one. It says, "I heard you. I do not need to fix it. And there is beauty here, right now, between us and in front of us." Sharina looks at the river too, and for a moment they are just two people standing at the edge of something vast and being honest with each other, and that is enough. In the morning, the crossing. Navid orchestrates it with the calm efficiency of long practice. The donkeys are led onto the ferry in groups of 4, their eyes wide, their hooves uncertain on the wet timber. The bales of cloth are placed in the center, wrapped in oiled leather against the spray. Keshvar crosses with the first group, gripping the ferry's rail, watching the far bank grow closer with a feeling she will later describe to Darayava as the moment she understood that the world was real. The current pushes the raft downstream, and the ferryman adjusts the guide ropes, and the water makes a sound against the hull that is deep and resonant, like a voice speaking in a language too old to understand. Darayava crosses with the second group. He stands at the rear of the ferry and watches the western bank recede and feels with a clarity that surprises him that he is leaving something behind, not a place, a way of being. The western half of the road is the half he knew as a courier, the stations, the relay legs, the landscape of his old life. The eastern half is new. He has never ridden east of the Euphrates. Everything from here forward will be seen for the first time. The caravan reassembles on the eastern bank, dripping and relieved. Navid waves them off from the western side, a small figure against the pale bluff, and then the road takes them east, and the river sound fades behind them, and the world ahead is different. East of the Euphrates, the empire feels different. It is not something Keshvar can articulate at first. It is more like a shift in the quality of the air, a change in the taste of the bread at the way stations, a subtle alteration in the way people stand and speak and greet each other. The land itself is changing too. The dry, scrubby lowlands give way to rolling hills covered in spring grass, cut by small rivers that run fast and cold from the mountains to the north. The soil is darker here, richer. Farmers work terraced fields on the hillsides, growing barley and wheat, and the smell of turned earth drifts across the road in the mornings. The stations in this region are staffed by people who speak Aramaic as their common tongue. The language of empire, the lingua franca that allows a Babylonian scribe and a Lydian merchant and a Persian courier and a station keeper of uncertain ancestry to understand each other, however imperfectly. But beneath the Aramaic, Keshvar hears other languages, fragments of what might be Armenian or Assyrian or something older that she cannot place. The empire is a house with many rooms, and she is walking through them one by one. The food changes, too. At a station in the hills, the keeper's wife brings them a stew of lentils and lamb cooked with a dried herb Keshvar does not recognize, sharp and slightly bitter, with a fragrance that lingers in the back of the throat. There is flatbread baked in a clay oven sunk into the ground, charred and blistered on the outside, soft within. There are dates, the first Keshvar has tasted, brought from somewhere far to the south, wrinkled and dark and almost overwhelmingly sweet. She eats one and then another and looks at Shirina with an expression of such pure delight that Shirina laughs, and the sound of Shirina's laughter surprises everyone, including Shirina. Darayava's leg is healing. He still limps, but the sharp pain has dulled to a deep ache that flares only on steep ground or after a long day of walking. He has stopped riding the donkeys. He walks with the caravan, keeping pace, and though the pace still feels slow to some part of him that has not yet let go of the gallop, he is beginning to find something in it that is not merely tolerable, but almost good. Walking, he has discovered, is a kind of thinking. The rhythm of it, step, 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 the body working below the level of conscious attention, frees the mind to wander, and his mind has been wandering into territory it has never visited before. He and Keshvar walk together often now. It has become natural, unplanned. They simply find themselves side by side in the morning and stay there. Their conversations have moved past the careful politeness of strangers into something looser and more honest. She asks him about his family. He tells her about his father, a minor official in a provincial town, who was proud when his son was selected for the courier service. Proud of the uniform and the imperial seal and the honor of carrying the king's words. Darayava does not say that his father's pride has become a weight. Keshvar hears it anyway, in the way he talks around it, approaching the subject and then veering away, like a rider skirting an obstacle on the road. She tells him about Sardis, about the dye works where she sometimes helped as a girl, carrying bundles of raw wool to the vats and watching the women stir the deep red liquid with long wooden paddles, about the way the dye stained their hands and arms up to the elbow so that the dye workers of Sardis could always be recognized in the street by the color of their skin, madder red, saffron gold, the dark brownish purple of the murex. She tells him that she used to think the whole world smelled like a dye works because she had never been anywhere else. He laughs. It is the first time she has heard him laugh, and it changes his face completely. The tightness leaves it, and he looks for a moment like someone who has not yet decided to be unhappy. One morning, as the caravan begins its day in the gray light before sunrise, Keshvar notices Darayava standing a little apart from the camp, facing east, where the sky is just beginning to lighten. He is still and quiet, his face lifted toward the coming sun. He stands there for perhaps a minute, saying nothing, and then he rejoins the caravan and begins helping to load the donkeys. She does not ask him about it, but she notices that he does this every morning. It is not a performance. It is not even, she thinks, entirely conscious. It is simply something in him, a habit of the body, or of something deeper than the body, that turns toward the light each morning the way a plant does. She does not know enough to call it prayer, and perhaps it is not prayer in any formal sense, but it is reverence, or near enough. And it tells her that there is more to this restless young man than the restlessness. Bardia, too, observes. He is a great observer. It is what he was trained for all those years at the archive, reading the tiny pressed marks in wet clay and finding meaning in their arrangement. He watches the four of them, Shirina, Keshvar, Darayava, and himself, with the quiet attention of a man who has spent his life recording things and is now, for the first time, inside the record. He sees how Keshvar has changed since Sardis. She walks differently now, with more confidence, her shoulders open rather than drawn in. He sees how Darayava's anger has softened into a kind of questioning. He sees how Shirina, who was so self-contained when the journey began, has begun to leave small openings in her composure. The laugh over the dates, the conversation at the river, the way she now walks beside Bardia in the evenings rather than ahead of the caravan where a leader walks. He records none of this on clay. He carries it instead in the archive of his attention, and it is, he thinks, the most important document he has ever kept. Arshama joins them on a cool morning in the foothills, where the road begins its long approach to the Zagros Mountains. The caravan has stopped at a small station tucked into the crease of a valley, a modest place, just a few rooms and a well and a stable barely large enough for their 12 donkeys. The keeper tells Shirina that a healer has been staying here for 2 days, waiting for a caravan heading east. He has patience in the mountain communities beyond the pass and prefers to travel in company through the higher country, where the paths are narrow and the weather less predictable. Shirina agrees without hesitation. An additional traveler is no burden, and a healer is a welcome companion on any road. Arshama appears from one of the station's back rooms carrying a leather satchel and a cloth bag from which dried plant stems protrude at odd angles. He is a man of middle years, 40, perhaps 45, with a broad, calm face and the unhurried movements of someone who has learned that most things go better when you do not rush them. His clothes are practical and well worn, the color of dust and dried grass, and his hands are the most notable thing about him. Large, careful hands with blunt fingers, the hands of someone who works with them constantly and treats them as instruments. He greets Shirina with a respectful nod, greets the others with the same, and falls into step with the caravan as though he has always been there. He is Median from the old Median territories in the mountains south of Ecbatana, and he speaks Persian with a soft rolling accent that Keshvar finds instantly calming, though she cannot say why. He does not explain himself. He does not announce his skills or his purpose. He simply walks with them, and within a few hours it becomes clear that he is paying close attention to everything around him. The plants growing along the roadside, the quality of the water at each stream crossing, the animals, the people. It is Darayava's leg that draws them together. On the first evening, as the caravan makes camp in a grove of pistachio trees at the base of the foothills, Arshama asks Darayava quietly if he might look at the injury. Darayava hesitates. He has been managing the leg himself, rewrapping it each morning with the same linen strips, gritting his teeth through the worst of it. But there is a quality in Arshama's manner that makes refusal seem unnecessary. It is not authority. It is not even persuasion. It is simply competence, offered without conditions. Arshama unwraps the leg with the same careful attention he gives to everything. He examines it, pressing gently here, bending the ankle there, asking Darayava to tell him where the pain moves and what kind of pain it is, sharp or dull, constant or only when he steps. His questions are precise and practical, and Darayava answers them honestly, more honestly than he has answered anything about himself in weeks. The act of being examined, of having someone attend to the reality of his body, opens a door he did not know was closed. The leg is healing, Arshama tells him, but it is healing crooked. The wrap is too tight in some places and too loose in others, and the muscle has begun to compensate in a way that will cause problems later if it is not corrected now. He unwraps the leg entirely, cleans it with water in which he has steeped a handful of dried leaves, astringent, faintly sharp-smelling, and rewraps it with fresh linen in a different pattern, firmer at the ankle and looser at the knee, with a thin splint of shaped wood along the outer calf. The difference is immediate. Daryava flexes his foot and looks up at Arshama with an expression of surprise that he quickly tries to suppress. Arshama does not acknowledge the surprise. He simply tells Daryava to rewrap the leg each morning in the same pattern and to walk on flat ground when he can, and to tell him if the pain changes. Over the next several days, as the caravan climbs into the foothills, Arshama and Daryava develop a quiet routine. Each morning, Arshama checks the wrapping. Each evening, he applies a fresh poultice, crushed leaves of a plant he gathers along the road, mixed with a small amount of oil he carries in a stoppered clay bottle. They do not have long conversations. Arshama is not a talker, but in the small exchanges that happen during these treatments, the practical, body-centered dialogue of healer and patient, something passes between them that is more significant than advice about bandages. Daryava watches Arshama move through the world and sees something he has not seen before, a man who travels constantly but is never in transit. Arshama is always going somewhere specific, to this community, to that patient, to a place where he is needed. But he is also always fully present wherever he happens to be. When he stops to gather a plant, he is entirely engaged in the gathering, examining the leaves, smelling the stem, sometimes tasting a small piece with the concentrated attention of a man who is having a conversation with the plant itself. When he cooks, he carries his own small store of spices and dried herbs, and he prepares simple meals that are inexplicably better than anything the station keepers provide. He is entirely in the cooking. When he walks, he walks. He does not walk in order to arrive somewhere. He walks because walking is what is happening now. One evening around the fire, Keshvar asks Arshama where his home is. He considers the question with the same unhurried attention he gives to everything, and then he says that his home is wherever he has patience. He says it without sadness or philosophy. It is simply a statement of fact, the way Sharina might say that her home is wherever her cloth needs to go. But Daryava hears in those words a resonance he cannot dismiss, the part of him that is afraid of stopping, afraid of staying, afraid that if he slows down, he will have to face the question of what his life is actually for. Arshama offers no answers to questions that have not been asked, no prescriptions for how to live. He simply exists, doing his work, moving through the world with a kind of purposeful calm that suggests there is a way to live that is neither the frantic speed of the relay nor the dull stillness of staying put. There is a third thing, a way of moving that is also a way of being present, and Daryava cannot stop thinking about it. The mountains rise around them like a slow wave, and the world becomes vertical. The Zagros range is not a single wall of stone, but a series of long, parallel ridges running northwest to southeast, folded into each other like the pages of a book left open in the wind. The road threads between them, climbing and descending, each pass revealing a new valley, each valley holding its own small world, a village, a flock of goats, a grove of Persian oaks so old their trunks are wider than the road. The air changes hour by hour as they gain and lose elevation, cool and sharp on the ridges, warm and sheltered in the valleys, and everywhere the smell of wild thyme and something else, something resinous and green, the breath of the oak forests that cover the mountain slopes in a canopy so dense that the road passes through tunnels of living wood where the light turns gold and green, and the sound of the caravan's footsteps is muffled to a whisper. The pace slows here. It must. The donkeys pick their way carefully on the steeper stretches, placing each hoof with deliberate precision on the loose stone. Shirina walks at the front of the line, reading the path, choosing the footing. The caravan stretches into a long, single-file procession on the narrower passages, and there are moments when Keshvar, somewhere in the middle, can see only the donkey ahead of her and the rock wall beside her and a sliver of sky above, and she feels as though the mountains have swallowed them entirely and are carrying them through their body toward the other side. She is not afraid. She is something beyond afraid. She is so far outside anything she has ever known that fear has become irrelevant, replaced by a kind of acute, wide-open attention. Every detail registers. The lichen on the rocks, gray-green, intricate, older than anything human. The sound of water running somewhere beneath the stones, invisible but constant. A hawk that launches itself from a cliff face and hangs in the air below them, because they are so high that the birds fly beneath the path, and the strange vertigo of looking down at a thing that is itself looking down. It is in the Zagros that the journey's deepest conversations happen, as though the mountains, by narrowing the physical world, have widened the inner one. Shirina and Bardia walk together through a long stretch of oak forest on the third day in the mountains. The canopy filters the midday sun into a green-gold haze, and the path is soft with fallen leaves, and the donkeys move quietly, and for a while neither of them speaks. It is Bardia who breaks the silence, but gently, the way he does everything, not to fill it, but to offer something he has been carrying. He tells her that he has been thinking about what she said at the Euphrates, about her life working like a well-made tool. He says he understands it because his life has worked the same way, efficiently, reliably, and with a kind of emptiness at the center that efficiency cannot touch. He tells her that when Nasayat left, he expected the emptiness to be about her absence, and it was, at first. But over time, and here the oak canopy shifts above them, letting through a column of warm light that moves slowly across the path. He realized that the emptiness had been there before she left, and that her leaving had simply made it visible. He had been going through the motions for longer than he wanted to admit. The archive, the tablets, the careful recording of other people's transactions, it had all been real work, good work, but somewhere along the way it had stopped being enough, and he had not noticed because the routine was so steady that it filled the shape of a life without actually being one. He says that this journey, this slow, impractical, physically uncomfortable journey across the empire, is the first thing he has done in years that feels like it belongs to him, not to the archive, not to his obligations, to him. Shirina walks beside him and listens, and she recognizes in his words something she has not been able to say about herself. She has built her own version of the same trap, but hers is made of movement instead of stillness. She has been so busy crossing the empire that she has not noticed she was using the crossing as a way to avoid being anywhere. The road was not just her livelihood, it was her hiding place. She does not say this, not all of it, but she says enough. something about how she always thought she was brave because she traveled alone, and how she is beginning to wonder whether traveling alone was actually the easier thing. The harder thing, she says, would be to let someone walk beside her and not speed up. Bardia looks at her, and his expression is tentative, warm, almost shy, and it makes him look, for a moment, much younger than his years. He says that he is not a fast walker. He says it with the faintest trace of a smile, and she understands that he is not talking about walking. Further back along the mountain path, Keshvar and Darayava are having their own conversation, though they do not know that it mirrors the one ahead of them. They are sitting on a flat rock at the edge of a switchback, resting while the donkeys navigate a steep section one at a time. The valley below is deep and green, and a river, thin as thread from this height, winds through it. The air is clean and cool and carries the smell of pine from somewhere above them. Daryava tells her that he has been thinking about Arshama, about the way Arshama moves through the world, always traveling, always purposeful, never lost. He says that before the injury, he thought he had the same thing. He thought that being a courier was a purpose, carrying the king's words, keeping the empire connected, being part of the great chain of riders that Herodotus would one day compare to a relay of fire. But now, sitting on this rock, looking at this valley, he is not sure. He was part of the chain, yes, but he was also interchangeable. Any rider could carry the message. The message did not need him specifically. It needed a body on a horse, and he happened to be the body. He says this without bitterness, because it is not a bitter realization. It is simply a clear one, and clarity, he is learning, can be a kind of relief. Keshvar listens. Then she tells him something she has not told anyone, that she is nervous about Susa, not about the city itself, but about the distance between who she was in Sardis and who she will need to become. She says that some mornings the distance feels smaller. She can almost see across it, and other mornings it stretches ahead of her like the plateau, and her chest tightens, and she reaches for the clay pendant without thinking. Darayava looks at her, really looks at her with the full attention he has been learning to give, and says that he has watched her for weeks and that she is not the same person who left Sardis. She is steadier, she is braver, she asks better questions, she notices things that other people miss. He says that he does not know what will happen in Susa, for her or for him, but he knows that she has already crossed mountains she did not think she could cross, and that the ones ahead are not as high as the ones behind. It is the most he has ever said to anyone about anyone, and he means every word of it, and Keshvar looks at him and does not speak for a long moment, and the silence between them is not empty, it is full. It is the silence of two people who have said something true and are sitting with the weight of it, and the mountains around them are enormous and ancient and do not care about the smallness of human fears, and that somehow is the most comforting thing of all. The path forks on a morning when the mist sits low in the valleys and the mountain tops float above it like islands in a white sea. The caravan has been climbing steadily for 2 days through a stretch of the Zagros, where the oak forests thin and give way to open meadows dotted with wildflowers, purple crocuses, small yellow blossoms whose name Arshama knows but Keshvar cannot remember, white clusters that grow close to the ground in the shelter of boulders. The air at this elevation is thin and sweet, and the mornings are cold enough that breath rises in clouds, and the donkeys' coats are damp with condensation until the sun reaches them. At the fork, a narrow track leads north, descending into a valley that is invisible in the mist, but that Arshama knows is there. A valley where a community of shepherds and their families live scattered across the hillsides, tending flocks and growing what the stony ground will yield. He has visited them before, many times. There is an older woman whose joints swell and stiffen each winter. There are children he has treated for fevers. There is a man who injured his hand in a fall last autumn and whose grip Arshama wants to check. They are expecting him, or if not expecting him exactly, then accustomed to his arrivals. The healer who appears when the pass is clear and stays for a few days and tends to what needs tending and then moves on. The farewell is quiet, as Arshama's way of being in the world is quiet. He adjusts Daryava's wrapping one final time, checking the splint, pressing the linen flat with his careful fingers. The leg is much improved. Daryava can walk without significant pain now, and the ankle bends as it should, and the muscle that had been compensating crookedly has begun to find its proper line. Arshama tells him to continue the poultice for another week and then let the air do the rest. He reaches into his cloth bag and produces a small bundle of dried leaves tied with a strip of bark. He hands it to Daryava and tells him to steep the leaves in hot water and soak the linen wrapping in it before he applies it each morning. The leaves will keep, he says, for the length of the journey remaining. Daryava takes the bundle and holds it and does not know what to say. He has received treatment from Arshama for barely more than a week, and yet the man's presence, his steady, purposeful calm, has done something to Daryava that he is only beginning to feel. It is not that Arshama told him anything he did not already know. It is that Arshama showed him, by the simple fact of how he lives, that the thing Daryava has been searching for exists, that it is possible to move through the world without being consumed by the movement, that a life can be both itinerant and rooted, if the roots are in purpose rather than place. He does not say any of this. He says thank you, and he means it in more ways than the words can carry, and Arshama accepts it with a steady, unhurried dip of his head, the same gesture he gives to everything, neither more nor less, and turns to the others. He shakes Bardia's hand in the Babylonian fashion, which tells Kishvar that he has spent time in Babylon, that his travels have taken him further than the mountains of his birth. He bows slightly to Shirina, who returns the bow with the easy grace of someone who knows the protocols of a dozen cultures and gives each its due. And he places his hand briefly on Keshvar's shoulder and says something to her that only she hears, a single sentence spoken softly that makes her smile. Then he walks down the narrow path into the mist, his cloth bag over his shoulder, the dried stems nodding with each step, and within a minute the mist has taken him, and he is gone. Daryava stands at the fork and watches the place where Arshama disappeared. The mist moves slowly, filling the space where the healer was, and the mountains are silent except for the sound of water somewhere below, and Daryava feels something settle in him, not a decision, not yet, but the space where a decision will eventually grow. A cleared place, a patch of ground where something can be planted. Shirina calls the caravan forward. The road continues east, and Daryava turns from the fork and walks on, carrying the small bundle of dried leaves in his hand as though it is something more fragile and more valuable than it appears. The descent from the Zagros is a slow unraveling. The mountains do not end abruptly. They diminish, ridge by ridge, each one lower than the last, the valleys between them widening, the forests thinning to scattered trees, and then to scrub, and then to the pale, heat-shimmering expanse of the Khuzestan lowlands. The air thickens as they descend. The sharp, resinous coolness of the mountain forests gives way to warmth, then to heat, a flat, heavy heat that settles on the skin like cloth and carries the smell of dust and river mud and something vegetal and sweet that Keshvar eventually identifies as date palms. She has never seen a date palm before. The first one appears at the edge of an irrigated field, its trunk rough and fibrous, its crown of fronds moving slowly in a breeze she cannot feel at ground level, and she stops and stares at it with the frank wonder of someone for whom the world is still expanding. The landscape of Khuzestan is utterly unlike anything they have crossed. It is flat and low and green where the irrigation canals reach, brown and cracked where they do not. The canals themselves are marvels of engineering, narrow channels of packed earth and brick that carry water from the rivers to the fields in a web so intricate that from a distance the land looks like a page of writing, the canals forming lines and the green fields forming the spaces between them. Bardia, who has lived his whole life in canal country, recognizes the system and points out its features to Keshvar with the quiet pleasure of a man who has found something familiar in a foreign place. The angle of the channels, he tells her, is designed to let the water flow by gravity alone. No pumps, no wheels, just the patient mathematics of slope and distance, worked out by engineers who understood that water, like everything else in the empire, flows most efficiently when someone has taken the time to think carefully about where it is going. The way stations in the lowlands are different from the stone buildings of the plateau and the mountains. Here, the walls are made of sun-dried brick, thick and pale, and the roofs are flat and covered with layers of palm fronds that provide shade against the fierce sun. The courtyards are larger, designed to accommodate bigger caravans. This is a major artery now, the last stretch of the royal road before Susa, and the traffic is heavier. They share stations with other groups, merchants carrying copper and tin from the north, officials traveling with sealed leather pouches of correspondence, a family relocating to the capital with their belongings loaded onto a cart drawn by oxen. The road is full in a way it was not on the plateau, and the fullness gives it a different energy, bustling, purposeful, the energy of proximity to power. But inside the caravan, the energy is different. There is a tenderness to these final days that none of them expected, a quality of attention that comes from knowing that what is happening will soon be over and cannot be repeated. The caravan has been together for more than 2 months now. They have crossed mountains and rivers and 1,000 miles of empire. They have watched each other change. And now, with Susa perhaps 10 days away, they are aware, all of them, in their different ways, that the road is ending, and that the small, improbable community they have built upon it will soon dissolve into the larger world. Keshvar feels it most acutely. She has spent the journey becoming someone, growing into a version of herself that did not exist in Sardis, that could not have existed without the road and the people on it. And now the road is delivering her to the place where that new self will be tested, and she is grateful and uncertain in equal measure, and the two feelings have woven together so tightly that they feel like one. She and Darayava walk together through the date palm groves, and their conversations have changed. They are quieter now, less exploratory, more honest. The easy energy of their early friendship, the excitement of discovering another person, the delight of shared newness, has deepened into something that neither of them has a word for. It is not love exactly, or not only love. It is the recognition that another person has become essential to your understanding of yourself, and that you are about to be separated from them, and that the separation will leave a shape in you that nothing else will quite fill. Darayava does not say this. He is not a man of many words, and the words he has are not suited to this kind of precision. But he walks beside her through the palm groves in the late afternoon light, and he matches his pace to hers without thinking, and when their hands brush accidentally, he does not pull away, and these small facts say what his words cannot. Shirina observes all of this. She has been observing all of it for weeks, and she feels something she did not anticipate when she agreed to take Keshvar to Susa. She feels the ache of a woman who has helped someone grow and must now let them go. It is not a mother's feeling exactly, because Keshvar is not her child. It is something more complicated, the feeling of a teacher who has become, without intending to, a friend. And who knows that the best thing she can do now is step back and let the person she has guided find their own footing. She does not step back entirely, not yet. There is still the road, and the road still needs managing, but she manages it with a lighter hand now, trusting Keshvar with tasks she would not have trusted her with 2 months ago. Negotiating the price of grain at a station, checking the donkey's hooves for stones, reading the road ahead for the best path when the surface is rutted by cartwheels. Keshvar does these things competently, even gracefully, and each time Shirina watches her do them, a thread loosens in Shirina, a thread of control, of self-sufficiency, of the old habit of doing everything herself because doing it herself was easier than trusting someone else. Bardia, meanwhile, has grown quieter as Susa approaches. He speaks less during the day and sits longer by the fire at night, staring into the flames with an expression that Shirina has learned to read as not sadness, but anticipation. The complicated anticipation of a man who is about to receive something he has wanted for 30 years, and is afraid that wanting it has made it larger than it can possibly be. What if Susa is just a city? What if the palace is just a building? What if the archive is just a room full of tablets, no different from the one he left behind in Babylon? Shirina sits beside him one evening and says nothing for a long time, and then she says that she has been to Susa and that it is not just anything. She tells him about the glazed brick walls of the palace, how they catch the light in the morning and seem to glow with an inner fire, blue and gold and white. She tells him about the great columns of the audience hall, each one topped with the carved figures of 2 bulls standing back to back, and how the first time she saw them, she stood in the plaza below and felt small in a way that was not diminishing but expanding, as though her own smallness was a kind of proof that something larger existed. She tells him that the archive at Susa holds tablets from every corner of the empire, records of things he has spent his life writing about, stored in the very rooms where the decisions were made, and that when he sees it, he will understand that his work mattered, that the careful columns of numbers and the precise notations of grain and silver were not abstractions, but the language in which an empire speaks to itself. Bardia listens, and the worry does not leave his face entirely, but something else enters it, a kind of readiness. He nods. He thanks her. And Shirina realizes, with a clarity that catches her off guard, that she has just described Susa to this man with more love than she has ever described any place, and that the love was not for the city, but for the fact that he wanted so badly to see it, and that she could give him this one thing, the assurance that it was worth the journey. The walls appear on the fourth morning after they leave the last foothills of the Zagros. The caravan has been crossing the flat, irrigated plain for days, following the road through fields of young wheat and barley, past villages of mud brick houses clustered around wells, through groves of date palms so dense that the road becomes a tunnel of green shadow. And then, on a morning when the air is already warm and the sky is a pale, washed blue, Shirina points east and tells them over there. Keshvar looks and sees, at first, only a shimmer on the horizon, the heat playing tricks, making the flat land ripple and dance. But as they walk, the shimmer resolves into something solid, a line of pale walls, long and low, rising out of the plain like a natural formation of the earth, and above the walls, catching the early sun, the upper terraces of the palace of Darius, a stepped structure of enormous scale, its surfaces faced with glazed brick that blazes blue and gold and white in the morning light. The effect is not sudden, it builds. With each mile, the city grows more present, more detailed. The walls acquire gates, the terraces acquire columns, the rooftops multiply. By the time the caravan reaches the western approach, the city has become an immensity, a place so large and so deliberate that it seems less built than willed into being. The road widens as it nears the gate, merging with other roads, filling with other travelers, merchants, officials, laborers, soldiers, families, a river of human purpose flowing toward the center of the empire. Keshvar walks through the western gate of Susa and into a world she has imagined for months, and that bears no resemblance to her imagining. The scale is the first thing, the height of the walls, the width of the streets, the sheer number of people moving through them with the purposeful energy of a city that knows exactly what it is. The buildings are larger and more ornate than anything in Sardis. The streets are cleaner, straighter, laid out in a grid that speaks of planning rather than the organic tangle of an older city. And everywhere, on every surface that catches the eye, there is color. The famous glazed brick of the Persian builders, blue and gold and green, depicting lions and bulls and winged figures and geometric patterns that repeat and interlock in a rhythm that seems almost musical. Bardia has stopped walking. He stands in the middle of the street, and people flow around him the way they float around the boulders in the mountain streams, and he does not notice them. He is looking at the palace terrace. The great columns of the audience hall are visible from here, rising above the lower buildings, and between them the carved figures of the bulls, enormous, elegant, frozen in a permanent gesture of alertness that manages to be both powerful and serene. He has written about these columns. He has copied descriptions of them, recorded the inventories of materials used in their construction, the cedar from Lebanon, the gold from Sardis, the lapis lazuli from Sogdiana, the ivory from India. He has held the numbers in his hands, the weights and measures, the tallies of workers. And now here they are, the real things, the actual columns, standing in the actual sun, and they are more beautiful than any number could convey. His eyes are bright, and Shirina, standing beside him, does not say anything. She just stands there with him and lets him have this moment, this meeting between a man and the thing he has spent his life describing without ever seeing, this collapse of distance between the record and the real. It is, she thinks, one of the most honest expressions of feeling she has ever witnessed, and it moves her in a way she was not prepared for. The caravan makes its way to the merchant quarter where Shirina has contacts and arrangements. The bales of dyed cloth are unloaded and inspected by a representative of the textile workshops, a brisk, efficient woman who examines each piece with practiced fingers, holding the fabric up to the light, checking the evenness of the dye, the tightness of the weave. The Lydian purple draws a murmur of approval. The saffron-dyed wool is pronounced excellent. Shirina conducts the transaction with the same precise competence she has brought to everything on the road, and when it is finished and the payment is agreed upon, she stands in the courtyard of the merchant house and breathes out, and her posture shifts, a release, subtle but visible, the exhale of a woman who has carried a weight across an empire and has set it down. Keshvar is taken to the textile workshop by one of Shirina's contacts, a woman who knows the administration and will introduce her to the people she needs to know. The workshop is a large, airy building near the palace quarter, filled with looms and dye vats and the sound of women working, and Keshvar stands in the doorway and looks at it and feels with a sudden sharp clarity that she has arrived, not at a place, at herself. This is what she came for, this room, these looms, this work, and she is ready for it. Not because the fear is gone, but because the fear is smaller now than the part of her that says yes. She turns back to look at Shirina, who is standing in the street outside, watching her. Their eyes meet, and the gratitude does not need to be spoken. It is there, in the look, the whole journey, the whole transformation, everything that Shirina made possible, and everything that Keshvar earned for herself. Shirina nods once. It is the same nod she gave at the gate of Sardis on the first morning, but it means something entirely different now. The last evening falls over Susa like a cloth of amber and rose. The caravan's business is concluded. The dyed wool and linen have been delivered to the textile merchants, weighed and inspected and paid for in silver that Shirina counts carefully and stores in a leather pouch inside her traveling robe. The donkeys have been stabled. The hired handlers who accompanied the caravan have been paid and have drifted into the city to find food and rest and whatever pleasures Susa offers to men with coins in their hands and no road ahead of them. What remains is the small private work of parting. Keshvar and Darayava walk together through the streets of the lower city in the late afternoon. The crowds have thinned as the heat of the day gives way to the gentler warmth of evening. They pass through a market where a vendor is selling pomegranates, split open, the seeds glistening like jewels in the slanted light. And Darayava buys two, and they eat them walking, the juice running over their fingers, staining their hands the way the dye works stained the hands of the women in Sardis. Keshvar laughs at this and tells him, and he looks at his red-stained fingers and smiles, and the smile carries everything he cannot say. They find a low wall at the edge of a plaza near the royal quarter where the palace terrace rises above them, and the glazed archers on the walls seem to glow in the evening light, and they sit. They do not talk about the future or make promises. They are old enough to know, and the road has made them old enough, that promises made at the end of a journey are fragile things, easily broken by the weight of what comes next. Instead, Keshvar tells him that she will think of the mountains, that when she is working in the textile workshop and the days are long and the work is difficult, she will think of the Zagros and the view from the switchback and the sound of the hawk below the path. She tells him that she will think of walking. Darayava tells her that he does not know what he is going to do. He says it plainly without the frustration that would have accompanied those words a month ago. He says that for the first time, not knowing feels like an open door rather than a closed one. He says that he thinks he might walk for a while longer before he decides. She reaches out and takes his hand briefly and then lets it go. The gesture is small and complete and holds everything: the affection, the uncertainty, the tender, unresolved possibility that the road has created between them and that only time will shape into whatever it becomes. He looks at her and she looks at him, and the evening light is golden on the walls of the palace and on the plaza and on their faces, and neither of them needs to say the thing they are both thinking, which is that this is not an ending. It is a pause, a breath between sentences. The road goes on, and they are young, and the empire is vast, and the world has more in it than either of them has yet imagined. Across the city, Shirina and Bardia are walking too. She is showing him Susa, not the official Susa, not the palace and the administrative quarter, but the city she knows from her previous visits. The baker near the canal bridge who makes flatbread with sesame and nigella seed. The small courtyard behind the textile merchant's row where someone has planted a garden, pomegranate trees and roses and a grapevine trained along a wall, improbably green in this hot, flat city, tended by someone who understood that beauty is not a luxury but a necessity. The view from the top of the old Elamite mound, where you can look out over the whole of Susa and see, in the distance, the shimmer of the plain stretching south and east toward the Gulf and the edge of the known world. Bardia absorbs everything. His curiosity, which has been the engine of this journey, has not diminished with arrival. If anything, it has intensified, because Susa is not one thing but 1,000 things, and each one raises questions that lead to other questions, and he is aware, with a gentle pang, that a lifetime would not be enough to answer them all. But a lifetime is not what he needs. A beginning is what he needs, and this is a beginning. He asks Shirina how long she plans to stay in Susa. He asks it carefully, the way he asks everything that matters, not casually but with deliberate attention, giving the question the weight it deserves. Shirina considers. She has always stayed in Susa only long enough to complete her business, a few days, a week at most, before beginning the return journey to Sardis. The road pulls at her. It always has. There is cargo to arrange for the return trip, contacts to maintain, the next crossing to plan. But the road will be there. The road is always there. It has been there for longer than anyone alive, and it will be there tomorrow and the day after and the season after that. It does not need her to walk it immediately. It will wait. She tells Bardia that she is not in a hurry. She says that she thought she might stay for a while if the city has things worth seeing. She says this with a lightness that is not quite casual, and Bardia hears what is underneath it. The offer, the opening, the quiet admission that she does not want to walk away from this yet. He tells her that he thinks Susa has a great many things worth seeing. He tells her that he would be glad of a guide. They stand together on the old mound as the sun drops below the western horizon, the direction they came from, the direction of the royal road, the direction of Sardis and the Hermus Valley and the Aegean and all the miles they have crossed together. The sky turns colors that Keshvar would recognize from the dye works: madder red, saffron gold, the deep blue violet of the last light. The city below them settles into evening. Lamps are lit in windows. The sound of the day's commerce fades, replaced by quieter sounds: a woman's voice singing somewhere, a dog barking, the creak of a cart making its last delivery. Shirina and Bardia do not talk about what comes next. They have learned on the road that the future is best approached the way you approach a mountain pass, one step at a time, watching your footing, trusting that the path will continue even when you cannot see around the bend. What they have now is enough. It is more than either of them expected to find on a trade route across the empire, and they are wise enough, or the road has made them wise enough, to hold it gently and not ask it to be more than what it is. They stand together in the fading light, and the city hums below them, and the road stretches away to the west, invisible now in the gathering dusk, but present nonetheless, always present, always carrying someone toward something, the long thread that stitches the empire together, one station at a time, one step at a time, one ordinary life at a time. And now let the road carry you too. Let it carry you gently, the way it carried them, not in haste, not toward any destination that demands your arrival, but slowly, easily, the way a river carries a leaf on its surface, the way the evening carries the last light westward across the plain. The caravan is resting, the donkeys are stabled and fed, the travelers have found their places for the night, Keshvar in her new quarters near the workshop, Darayava in a lodge near the eastern gate, Bardia and Shirina somewhere in the old city, where the streets are quiet and the walls still hold the warmth of the day. The stars come out over Susa, the same stars that shine over Sardis, the same stars that watch the caravan cross the plateau and the mountains and the river. The empire sleeps beneath them. The station keepers in their stone houses along the road, the farmers in their fields, the shepherds on the hills, the ferrymen at the river crossings, the couriers pausing between relays, the scribes setting down their style, the weavers folding their cloth, the healers making their rounds through the mountain villages where someone is always in need of a steady hand. The road goes on, it always goes on, and somewhere on it, right now, in the darkness between two stations, a traveler is walking east and another is walking west, and they will pass each other in the morning without knowing each other's names, and the empire will hold them both, and the road will carry them where they need to go.